Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, though arms we need, not as a call to battle, though in battle we are, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself.
The inauguration of John F. Kennedy ignited a wave of excitement in a world exhausted by 2 world wars and now caught up in a Cold War that appeared to threaten nuclear Armageddon. He was the youngest man ever to become president, and his inaugural address was filled with energy, determination, idealism, and hope.
Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world.
Although fully 25% of Americans were Catholic by 1960, Kennedy was America's first Catholic president. He was also a longtime member of the Knights of Columbus, having joined soon after coming home from the war in the Pacific in 1946. And as president, he happily welcomed Supreme Knight Luke Hart to the White House. But in November 1963, his life and presidency were suddenly and tragically ended by an assassin's bullet. A nation in shock watched in stunned silence the unprecedented live television coverage of his funeral and the slow, sad procession toward Arlington National Cemetery. There he was laid to rest on a hill topped by Arlington House, with a classic view of the Lincoln Memorial to the east. Among the items buried with him was a silver rosary. Next to his grave, an eternal flame was lit, a continuing reminder of the ideals for which he had given such a clarion call as he assumed the presidency. The following year, work was begun on a visitor's area next to the gravesite, along with a low granite wall on which were engraved 6 quotes from Kennedy's inaugural address. The work was done by a young 24-year-old stonemason from Rhode Island named John Everett Benson, who worked with the Kennedy family to determine what would work best. The engravings have been seen and read by tens of millions of visitors over the past decades, but time and weather gradually took their toll, and the words became increasingly hard to read. In August 2010, when the Knights of Columbus held its 128th annual convention in Washington, D.C., Supreme Knight Carl Anderson, the other officers, and Supreme Directors paid a visit to Arlington National Cemetery. While visiting the Kennedy gravesite, they realized that the engraving on the wall was badly in need of restoration. They discussed it over dinner that evening, resolving to do something about it before the 50th anniversary of the speech, which was barely 5 months away. The Knights of Columbus offered to underwrite the cost of the restoration, and officials at Arlington National Cemetery quickly agreed to accept the gift. Gordon Ponsford, who has done similar work at more than a dozen sites in Arlington National Cemetery in recent years, was chosen for the job.
In this speech, it says, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I feel how the Knights of Columbus really took that meaning to heart in taking care of this project and taking care of our country's history.
On the day the work actually began, on October 27th, Ponsford was joined by the man who had done the original work, John Everett Benson, who had come down from Rhode Island to offer a few tips and reminisce a little bit as well.
Jacqueline Kennedy was very involved. She initially wanted the entire inaugural address carved. We did a series of samples. Usually in the stone business, a sample is a piece of stone like this. Well, we made these huge samples that were as big as this and about 5 feet wide. And we carved one that had letters the size it would require to take the whole inaugural address. Of course, she took one look and realized nobody would ever read it. And then she, with the help of the architect Jack Warneke and with Ted Sorensen, who wrote a lot of the speech, picked these particular quotes. And I put my oar in when I felt I needed to. My contribution was largely in the way they were broken up into lines. I insisted that the short paragraphs of prose had a nice shape to fit in this interesting and complicated shape of the masonry blocks of the wall.
The first thing we always do on every single project is you research it. You research it for materials used on it, materials that it's made of, who carved it, and all the information you can. Since most monuments that we restore are over 100 years old, we never talk to the sculptor or stone carver. They've joined the company of who they did the inscription for. And so for us to find John Benson was an absolute treasure.
See, but what you really need to do is you need to palette that edge out.
Right.
On the edge of the jar. We used to use a jar. Put the lithochrome in a jar, a baby food jar, and just palette it. And then if you carry that paletted edge right over, you will get one whole side to the letter,
right.
And then you get the other side. And the whole trick is keeping the whole letter wet. Well, I'm very, very pleased to realize that somebody is willing to step up to the plate and take care of this, because it needed doing. As I said to Gordon, the initial plan was that the stain would be redone every 10 or 15 years, just like painting a house. And Arlington said, oh, we'll take care of that, we'll take care of that. But of course it's an expensive thing to do, and Arlington is, like every big organization now, is pressed with rising costs. A whole number of cemeteries have gone broke because they run out of money, spend the endowment. And so I think Arlington itself is one of our great, great national monuments. And I think it's wonderful that the KFC has come to give them a hand with this particular job.
You know, there's a great project for the Knights of Columbus. It shows how they really adhere to, Kennedy's speech of what can we do for our country. And I think more people need to take that motto to heart.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Gordon Ponsford finished the restoration of the engravings in less than a week, helped along by a few days of unseasonably warm weather and an absence of rain. And so on January 20th, 2011, the 50th anniversary of one of the most famous and eloquent speeches in American history, visitors to the late President Kennedy's gravesite could once again read and remember the phrases that inspired the nation and the world.
The rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking His blessing and His help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own.